Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and put the clutch cover back on this VFR750 engine, and it may seem like a rather, anemic job for a video, but I wanted to go over some extra stuff in regards to, what you need to do to make sure that the fasteners are good and which ones go where. Sometimes they're different lengths and yada yada. And I just wanted to kind of cover some good practice. That would be the way to put it. Some good practice techniques on figuring out how to do this properly. You can look at your service manual and stuff for the details, but a lot of these service manuals don't really tell you to put bolt A in hole B, that sort of thing, or bolt B in hole B or something like that. You have to have a certain amount of base knowledge to do this, of course, and the service manuals are assuming that. So all right, I'm putting a couple parts here in front that you can't really see right now because I'm going to move you over out of the way and show you couple things, not out of the way, but in the way, or in the frame would be better. So here's our clutch cover. Now I'm showing this only because number one, it looks good, and number two, I don't look good, and number three, I wanted to show you the inside of it. Okay, a lot of these covers, no matter what bike you have, will have some sort of a sound damper inside of it. It'll have a plate or something in there, and that's what it's for. It is indeed a sound dampening mechanism or sound dampening attempt. Get you in frame here. And on this particular bike, it is a plate that looks like kind of like something that might look like part of one of those old percolator coffee makers, but it is not that. So it has a rubber seal that goes around it, and then it just simply fits in here, and there's just a couple of doodads with a nut. So I'm going to assemble this real quick, and we're going to put it in. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is if you are going to be just doing a clutch service and you got some debris inside the cover and you have one of these in here, you need to take it off, because I can guarantee you that there's crap behind here. No matter how well they seal this off with whatever they got, there's going to be shit behind there. And if it's behind there, it can get back out and contaminate, so you want to make sure it's all good and clean. And so that's why I took it out naturally, to do all the cleaning. And when I sent these out to have the Cerakote put on. This particular one just gets a little rubber shoulder washer and then kind of a little cup cap, I would say a cup washer that goes on top of it. Get out of there! This is on the inside of the motor. I don't care what anybody tells you. You got to Loctite it. And if I'm putting it on the inside of the engine, as far as covers go, it's getting red Loctite. If I have to take it out again in the future, I know what's in it as far as Loctite, and I'll just heat it up with a little bit of heat if necessary. Probably not, and then I can remove it. But I don't believe this is going to be necessarily need to be removed at any time in the near future. So we're going to go ahead and Loctite this in and torque it up. I'm sure there's a torque spec on this, but I got to be honest with you guys. When it comes to these small M6 fasteners, I do not use a torque wrench on them. Yep, I don't use one. It is way too easy to break these fasteners. I just know how tight to get them. Generally speaking, an M6 like this, if it's driven by a 10 millimeter, it's going to be an M6 most of the time. There are a few M8s out there, but it's about 6 foot-pounds this gets, 6 to 7. You just don't need much on them. And it's super easy to break them. I think I mentioned that. That's good right there. Let's double check. Oh yeah, that's good. Click. So yeah, I don't use torque wrench on them. Even on more important parts inside the engine, components, part of the engine, inside the engine, that sort of thing, I don't use them. It's too easy to snap them off, and I've done it before, and I know how tight to get them. Now I know I can get a better torque wrench, like a little inch-pound job, maybe an electronic one. I would trust that, but I don't have one. So at this point, we're just going to have to do with what we have to do it with, which is these. All right, so we know that's good. I know it's good. It ain't going to go anywhere. I'm going to clean up these edges a little bit more. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on them because I knew I was going to do it again. There's just a little bit of staining on them. But I'm going to turn this over right now. Let's go back to the actual engine crankcase itself. And I'm going to give you a sneak peek on a little trick here, which is this drawing. Because here's the fasteners. I can't remember where the little tabs and gizmos go that go on this as far as holding lines and holding wires in and stuff. And if you just go in your parts fishes, you don't really need to remember that anyway because it has it listed. So in this particular case, we can see that we have one there. We have the one there, which is kind of a metal bent over guy. These are those softer metal you can manipulate by hand, and then another likewise one there. There is also a couple of things you got to keep in mind regarding bolts on side covers are very often different lengths. If you look in the parts fiche in the listing of the parts that goes along with a photo like this, and you see the number 18, number 17, 17, and there's a 19, well, that indicates that you have different lengths. They're all M6 by 1.0 pitch and have an 8mm head side as far as what you're driving with, but in this case, we do have some different lengths. I don't bother with that either because I can tell when you put it in that it's either too long or it's too short, and I'll show you what I mean. It's when I get to that point. So as far as prepping your surfaces go, cleanliness is next to godliness, or you want to make sure they're clean. Now I have some paint over spray on here from doing the block, and I hit a couple of spots with some brake clean to see if it would come off. Some of it does, some of it doesn't. So that means the lighter stuff or overspray with a little bit of oil or something is going to come off. The rest of it's not. I don't really care. As long as it's on there, it's going to be fine. So you want to make sure your surfaces are very clean. A couple reasons for that. Number one, it's just good practice. And number two, you just want to be able to put gasket goo where it needs to go. We'll cover that here in a minute. Now, as far as these holes go, a lot of times you got really junked up holes on, these older bikes. When you take some apart, you take a bolt out, it's got a little bit of funk on it, and you can say, well, there's got to be some stuff in the hole too, a little corrosion, whatever it is. It's a good idea to chase these holes, and I don't recommend using a tap. Number one, a tap cuts threads, and you don't want to make these threads any bigger than they are. Number two, it's really easy to break a tap, especially a little M6. If you happen to bottom that and it's snapped, and that tap was tight against the bottom, it would be really hard getting out. So what I do is I actually use a chase tool that I made. And you can make these really easy. Now this is an M6, long M6 bolt from something, who knows what. And you can see I ground some features on it. Let me zoom up and that way it'll focus better, I think. Focus, there we go. You see we have some features ground into it lengthwise, almost like a tap. And I just take a wheel like this on my angle grinder, and I just run it along there. But I try to keep it at an angle like this. The thing's going to turn this way to go in. So what I want to do is I want to keep the angle up a little bit like this to give it almost like a little bit of a sharper edge. And then it'll go in there and grab whatever it needs to grab. That'll go, like gunk and stuff, that'll go on the inside, these little reliefs. And then it'll come out and you clean and blow the hole out and you're good. So this is what I do. You can do what you want with it, but I don't use a tap. The only time I'd use a tap is if the threads are compromised. And you just want to chase these holes, make sure they're good and clean. We'll put a towel up here so if it drags some crap out, it won't necessarily go into my clutch. Not that it probably makes a hill of beans a difference at this point. And you get a little bit of junk out. So I'll do all the holes and make sure that they're ready to go, and then we'll come back. Alrighty, now I got them, chased, so what we're going to do is blow them out. Now I want to say something about these holes here. Some of these holes are through holes, and some of them are blind holes. Now the blind holes are going to be where they don't want to drill into the block where the oil is. Generally speaking, you don't have holes on covers like this, not always, but generally speaking, that go into the oil area. Otherwise, you have to put some sort of a thread sealant on them. And that's where your service manual comes in handy. It'll say apply Loctite or a locking agent, which is their version of a thread sealer on a particular bolt. So before you blow these out, if you aren't sure, all you got to do is take a little straw like from brake clean and shove them in and see if it bottoms out. And then when you know that the ones that aren't through holes into any particular place you don't want to blow junk into, then you can blow however you want. There's only a couple of them that are through holes on this one. One's down here, you see. And I think the other one's down here. This is where the starter goes on the other side of this. All right, so basically that's how we're going to do that. Now when you're looking this stuff up, by the way, parts fishes, this is not known as a clutch cover normally. If you go in there and click on clutch, it's going to show you this crap. So what you usually have to look for is an engine cover or a right engine cover or a crankcase cover or a right crankcase cover. That's a nomenclature they use. So like I said, if you click on clutch, you're going to get that, or a starter clutch, something like that. Speaking of which, on a VFR, what I've come to learn is the starter clutches are known for cracking at these bolts. You can actually see it. You will not on this one, but you'll see it on the outside edge here. This is I can't explain how this works, but it's one-way dealio. You see the clutch goes, or I should say the drive gear rather from the starter allows it to spin one way and it won't spin the other way. All right, so you got to check these for torque to make sure that they are tight. I've already checked these. I've already inspected this, done a detail inspection, so I know it's good. Other things you have to consider before you put a cover on is any wires in here. These are the two pickups for the timing, and there's some wires from there just on the inside edge of this case. You want to make sure 100% sure you're not going to pinch anything like that. So it's just some things you just got to go over. We'll put a drop of oil here. That's a pivot point for this gear that the starter drive. I'll put a little more oil on this before I put the cover on. But that brings me to another thing, which is the dowel or alignment pins. Now your drawing will show you how many that you have on a particular cover. In this case, 1, 2. There's only 2 here. I don't know why I have 3, but must go somewhere else. I'll keep that in mind. These dowel pins you don't want to have really cruddy. You want to clean those before you put them in, because if you don't, they're not going to go in right and they will actually hang the cover up. So you definitely want to clean them on a wire wheel or something, and then you can use them. So first thing we're going to do is actually put a dowel pin in the hole. Yeah, on this one it doesn't fit all that tight, which is unfortunate, and I did notice that when I pulled this motor apart, but it is what it is. This cover may have gotten loose and warbled around. I don't know. This is going to act as a dowel pin in itself, but these guys will help hold it in. You know what? I think I'm going to put them on the cover side. No, I think I'll leave. Shit. I think I'll put them on the cover side instead. Shove one in here, and we'll shove the other one in here. You can do it either way, but I guess the cover side's better. As I was saying about dowel pins, I just had to double check something. So I want to put them in the cover. You got one there, and this one doesn't fit exactly the way I'd like it to fit, but it is what it is. There's no damage to the cover, and where it goes is right there. That spot right there is very shallow, and the drawing shows the same part for it, and you can see this sticks out just a little bit. So it is apparently the right one for it. So this is just what we're going to do. We can also just, since this one goes in this way, we could put that dowel pin on there, but it doesn't really matter. All right, next thing. What is the next thing? Let me think. I got the gasket laid. Now I laid it. These are Athena gaskets. Athena gasket. They're probably manufactured by the same place in China. They go under different names. I hate these. They never exactly line up right. But if I remember correctly, they are not available OEM from Honda at least. And I didn't bother trying to find a new old stock one. So it is what it is. Now, gasket goo, it's kind of like an oil thread on the internet. You can really get a lot of people getting real animated about it. There shouldn't be any need to lather up this cover or the block with gasket goo, except where the service manual tells you to do it. Number one, they're going to tell you to do it where this rubber grommet is for the pickup coils. On the other side where the stator is, it'll be where that penetrates that case with a similar grommet for the wires. They're going to tell you to put it here. Number two, they're going to tell you to put it on both sides of the block where the case is split. And that's right there. Right there. So there and there. That's the only place they're going to tell you to put gasket goo. There shouldn't be any need to put any gasket goo on the reverse side of where this goes for that particular feature for that grommet, because this is flat, but this is not. This is rubber, and it's irregular, and it's potential for oil to come out. So they're going to tell you to put it here, there, and there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put a little bit of, what is this stuff called? The right stuff, and just use a little brush. I'm going to take a little brush. That's why I keep those grocery store watercolor brush kits around. We're going to take a little brush. We're going to dab just a little bit on there, a little on there, slather a little here, put the cover on, and start putting bolts in. That's really all you should need. If you need more, then you got something else is wrong. Like the cover is significantly warped, or there's a problem here in the engine. Now, I don't believe there's any problem on the engine side, nor do I believe there's a problem over there where the cover is. So let's go get a little brush. We'll put a little on. We'll get this cover set, and then we'll put the bolts in. We'll talk a little bit about that. See if this actually works. Oh, there it goes. You can use Permatex, you can use what you want. This is what I happen to have on hand that's, darker color like black. So I'm going to put a little bit right there where that split is. You don't need much. And then put a little bit where this split in the case is over here. If you go on Alan Millard's channel, I know I mentioned him before on YouTube. This is how he applies grease when he puts, not grease, he may use it for grease. This is how he applies gasket goo. And this is how I did it when I put these cases back together as well. The bolts, of course, are clean, ready to go, and I got a little oil there on this dowel, this pin rather, for this whatever it's called, the little gizmo that thing rides on. All right, little pin, and that's fine. You can put a little bit inside here if you want, if it floats your boat. It don't really matter, but it's not going to make a hell of beans of difference on this. But I know somebody's out there going to be cringing, so I'll go ahead and do it because I don't want anybody to have a stroke over the fact that I didn't put a drop of oil somewhere. So we'll go ahead and put a little bit in there too. Now and this particular cover, as I said, this front pin doesn't fit very well, but this is an alignment too. This is an alignment for it as well. And the reason why you need pins is because certain things are aligned in a very accurate fashion and manner on these covers. And that's what the pins are for, to keep everything aligned while you do that. And of course, my gasket slipped. Alright, so it's sitting flush. Nothing's trying to push it away. You want to check that. But those pins are a fairly tight tolerance. So you want to make sure that they're in nice and straight. But now the cover's on. Alright, so bolts. Unless the service manual says to do it, you don't put oil and lubricate these bolts. I don't really care what anybody says. You just don't do it. This is how we're going to deal with this gasket rather. It doesn't fit real well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the bolts in with just about putting them down to where they're touching the case itself. And then we're going to work this cover in a little bit like this as we kind of work our way around and try to make it as even as possible, at least where you can see it. That's the best I have found with these ill-fitting gaskets, to make them look halfway decent. Now I remind you, in this particular case, case cover, you have 2 longer bolts. Then there's 11 of these shorter ones, and then 1 of this and 1 of that. Now if you don't have a drawing, it's pretty easy to see how things go in. Now this is kind of an extreme example, but it works. So if you're going to put this bolt in here and it sticks way out like that, it's the wrong bolt. And you definitely never ever ever want to put a bolt in that's too long on a blind hole. It is potentially a risk that you're going to punch it through into the block, and I have a bolt that somebody did that too on the other side actually, that is something I fixed on that shifter side. So it can definitely happen. So I just wanted to mention that. You can just kind of visually look at it and say, does this one go here? Well, it sticks out too far. You see how far that sticks out? Now let's put one in that's supposed to be there, which is one of these shorter ones. And you can see that looks much better. Alright, so that's what we're going to do. And again, I'm looking at the drawing too as I'm doing this, and I know one of these goes here. Alright, so let me get those in with the clips. As I said before, the cable stays, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about a couple other things, and then finish this part up. If you can't figure out from the drawing exactly where the little cable stays and stuff goes, you can't remember where it goes, the drawing can still help you, even though they don't necessarily have a line going to what hole these bolts go into. Find something you can reference it from. In this case, we have 11 main length bolts, shorter ones, number 17, and we have one, number 18, which is long, and then 19, which is longer. Now 19 goes right there, because it's the only place it will go, and you can tell it's right up in the front, so it's kind of easy to figure out. But when I put the bolt in, it doesn't stick out too far, and it doesn't go in too far, so I know that's right. So all you do at that point is you count over the other bolts to where this one is, and then you can figure it out. So in this case, we go 19. We go 1, 2, 3, 4. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we know that that's where this one goes right here. So that's just another way you can use the parts fish to double check and make sure. And once you establish that, you can count over to the other ones. Like, for example, there's one that goes down here to the left, and then there's one underneath here too. You can always move them around, but if you put it in correctly the first time, then you don't have to repeat an operation or a step. So we're going to torque these up now, and I push this in as far as I really can up here and try to keep the, I don't want, I'm trying to keep it a little bit more flush with the actual case. These gaskets just don't fit exactly right, unfortunately. So it is, the way it is. You manipulate them and you can get them pretty close. So it's just the way it is. So now I'm just going to snug each one of them. And again, I know there's a torque spec on these. It's probably 6 or 7 foot-pounds or whatever that equals in inches or inch pounds rather, or newton meters. I don't do it. I don't risk it. I've snapped these before, and I'm not doing it. I refuse to do it. Actually, before I torque these up, there's one thing I realize I need to do. And let me get back to that really quick and I'll show you. Something I actually should have done while this cover was off. I did not test, since the Cerakote went in these threads, whether or not this cap is going to be a problem. The gentleman told me, he said it's very thin. And in worst case scenario, you run it in and out a couple of times to hone the threads. Whew, lucked out there. I don't want to have to do that because then, I risk junk getting inside the motor. So that fits just fine. Now, I don't have the new O-ring on it yet. So we'll just go ahead and just leave that loose for now. Just want to plug the hole. These don't get painted from what I could see as far as the pictures online of other bikes. They don't get the Cerakote on them, so I left it plain. And I'll polish that up. You really can't see it. The end of the fairing kind of covers it up mostly. But if you're looking in this way, you can see it. This way. Oh yeah, where was I? We're going to torque this up. Alright, so whenever we're going to torque up something like this, we always do it in a crosswise fashion. Alright, now, I'm going to start at this one. Actually, I'll start at this one because it's got a cable stain, I'll remember. Click! Click, 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 click. Get the idea. Let me finish them up and then we'll come back. By the way, on these smaller holes, because I don't have the O-rings out for the dipstick or the fill cap, you can take one of these earplug gizmos and just kind of squeeze it in there and let it sit. And it'll expand out and hook into the threads and you're golden. So we'll just leave that there for now. That's the cover. Now the whole reason for putting this back on was we're going to do the valve clearances on this thing. But I need to clean up first before I do that, so I'm going to end this video here. And then we'll pick it up in another video. We're going to go over the actual valve clearances on this one. The reason why I wanted to show you this is because these V4s are kind of a, not necessarily unique, but a little different setup than you might find on typical bikes of that particular era, because a lot of them had flat tappet, with shim over or under bucket cams, and these don't. These have the stem and nut, so you can adjust them. But I want to show you a comparison between these and the VF750, because I have a VF750 motor out in the shed that's on an engine stand. And what we'll do is we'll do some shooting on this one for the next video as far as the valve adjustments go. And then we'll go out to the shed, we'll pop a head cover off, and I'm going to show you how that one looks in comparison. The difference in the technology, because if you come across one of these, VF or a VFR, knowing the difference between it and ahead of time is going to be helpful, because when I first looked at these I went, huh? And then I had to kind of figure it out. So we're going to close this one out. This is kind of a dumb video, I guess, because we just put a cover on. But there's more to it than just putting a cover on, in my opinion. There's good practice operations that you have to perform to make sure it's on right, and make sure everything's clean, and make sure everything is tightened. I will be replacing all this hardware that looks like shit. Like this one right here is a good example because it looked like crap. And I'm not going to do that until I get the engine back on the frame and running, because I need to prove all that stuff out again. I did some substantial tear down. I want to get this thing running with the rear wheel off the ground, off the lift, and run it through the gears and make sure everything's 100% before I spend a nickel more on any doodadery on this thing. Speaking of doodadery, you can go down to the doodads, subscribe, ring the bell, like the video, certainly helps the channel. And as always, don't just repair, restore. And we'll catch you on the next one when we deal with the valves. Take care. Thanks for watching.